Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter Ture from Business Review, and I'll be your host today. It is our pleasure to have with us aicas, who will be presenting us on the topic titled Changing Lanes. In this case, it's about all to do with monetizing the future of software-defined vehicles. Now, today's guest speakers of us will be Johannes, Biermann, who is the president of aicas, and we also have Matt Anderson, who is the business development executive. Now, I'd like to welcome everyone here to On24. You'll notice that this platform is browser-based, so if you do disconnect for any reason, please just click on the link that you received via email to rejoin the session. Please also use the questions widget, which is at the top right-hand corner of your screen, in case you wish to submit any questions. So just type them in to the box and click submit. We will then allocate some time at the end of the session to address any thoughts or questions that you may have. Please also use the yellow help widget in case you need any kind of assistance to resize, move, and maximize your screens to help you get a better view of today's presentation. But for now, please allow me to hand you over to our first speaker of the day. Johannes, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Really, thanks for the kind introduction, and welcome to everybody here on this webinar, positioned here by aicas. So I'm really joined here by Matt Anderson, as we say, colleague in crime almost. We're here to talk about basically the monetization of the future of the software-defined vehicles. I know many of you have seen online it's all about software. It's all about the software-defined vehicle. We want to talk about aspects of that, whether it's related to data, whether it's related to changes in the marketplace, and of course, with that also monetization opportunities that we want to discuss. The way we're going to do this is actually more in a conversation that I will have with Matt. Both of us have been in the auto industry for some time. Our company is engaged there for some while. And let me introduce actually this conversation by something that in your sense will certainly be a mirror of the past, if I should say. And this is about monetization today and tomorrow. So if we think about broadly this view centered around the vehicle as we come together here, and we remember, think about 100 years ago. I'm positioned here in Karlsruhe, Germany, very close to the epicenter of a lot of the German car manufacturing environments, including the supplier base. And for us, what's on the left side is real. It was a piece of hardware. And as we have seen over the last century, this has in stages really evolved into what I think fairly we can call today a digital asset, something that actually has multiple uses and is now being put to use for things like car sharing as a new business model, for a new business model outside of where we are that have to do with capabilities like digitally monitoring battery percentages and. So there's a whole lot of ideas that center around that. So with that in mind, Matt, as you look at that, you come from a long-term automotive background. How does that feel to now look at the vehicle as a digital asset?
Oh, absolutely right. It is a digital asset, and it's represents a huge change in the industry, right? Rightfully so. If you go back 100 years, the car was the asset. The asset was physical, and it was being discreetly monetized. Now, if you look at it, the car is producing assets in the form of data that many people can use. Data is very unique in the sense in compared to a car, frankly, because multiple people can use the same data at the same time for different reasons. So the opportunity here to do things that were never conceived of before is awesome. I think we are going to see a huge shift in, I know we're seeing a huge shift in the amount of technology that's going to be put into vehicles in the next 5 to 10 years that the industry's never seen before. And we will see business and monetization opportunities like we've never seen before.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So totally agree. And it almost feels like all of our life, because we depend so much on a vehicle that we actually drive, is now written in binary code in software bytes and pieces, and they're being put to use. I think you pointed to that, and we'll talk about that later in our conversation for sure. So
absolutely.
yeah, we thought about make some initial questions. Some of you are coming from a background of autonomous driving. Some of you have you looked at different levels of interactions there. So we put a poll out here that we want you to answer, and we'll take that into account for the conversation. So why don't we start with the poll, Peter?
Yes, thank you very much for that, Johannes. So the first question of today is, in your opinion, what role does autonomous driving technology have in the average car purchased by 2030? So please feel free to choose from any of the, like in this case, the choices below, and we'll definitely be able to, in this case, understand more in terms of autonomous driving tech for the future, in this case. So both Johannes and Matt, though, what would you think of this question, though, whilst the audience is answering?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting one because, the opinions vary so much. There's people like me who absolutely love to drive. Is that going to be a deciding factor for me at that point in time? Probably not. It'll be a nice to have, but then there's whole categories of people. I think this will be the determinant factor. If you think about, some of the younger people who really don't seem to have as much passion for driving as people in my age category, or there's groups of elderly and special needs people that this will give them a new sense of freedom.
Yeah. Absolutely agree with you, Matt. I think for me, there's almost like a little bit of a shadowy line between commercial users and private users. So we as consumer drive cars, but think about, and Matt hinted in that, for special needs, for example, transportation. Think about trucks, think about moving goods from point A to point B. What is it about? It's about efficiency of delivery, timely delivery. And that's where I think autonomous functions will certainly gain prominence.
No problem. All right, let's see how the audience has responded to this first question. So, let's see right now. So we will definitely see what answers people in this case would have actually answered. But in this case, let's move on to the next part then. All right.
Okay.
So you have...
Yeah. Thanks very much, Peter. So if we think about software going forward, this is I call it a trick picture. No, I mean, you think about the car that we all know and the experience, it's bright and sunny, but everything around the car these days, if it's in bytes and bits, driven by software, can be put to use. And I think what we have seen as a company over the last year is a tremendous amount of acceleration coming out of the COVID pandemic. Think about building out contactless features, based on sensors, within a car that identify who you are with your temperature, and making sure that there are more seamless, actually more contactless, ways of interacting. Beyond that, we also see that a lot of the business models around car sharing, the whole car charging infrastructure, that are really driven out of software integration, data being exchanged from point A to point B, even at the larger ecosystem level, think about regions, are taking place. And I think you could think about many new business models where AI-based companies or otherwise, the OEMs themselves are thinking through, what does that actually mean for me? And the capabilities reside in the software itself. So I think with that, Matt, what I would probably think is, let's move on to the next slide, which is really more about what is actually behind that, and that also ties into the autonomous side. So, Matt, why don't you give us a sense for what we could describe as the flower of sensors?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's what the vehicle has today is so much more complex than 5 years ago, and the number of sensors in the vehicle and the number of controllers in the vehicle are well over 100, right? And each of these is collecting and generating data that can be used in a myriad of ways, as we already discussed. And the same data can be used over and over again. So it really creates a new opportunity for us. And this really talks, when initially people think about data in the vehicle, they think about diagnostic data. How's my car performing, right? Is the engine operating correctly? Are my brakes worn? Those kind of things. But I think what we're really looking at now is taking data to another level of usage data. How is the car being used? Is it being driven differently? Johannes, you and I could have the exact same car, for example, and you may drive it totally different than I'm peeling off the red light and driving like a maniac, and you're driving very reasonably. My car should know how I drive and should, set my suspension and my braking power for that going forward. To really personalize it. So what we're looking at here is an era where the sensors are creating new domains where we can generate and get valuable data, not only on the vehicle, but on the usage of the vehicle. And I think you'd agree with this, Johannes. So this is really where the opportunity is going to be in the future. We don't really know what those business cases, use cases are yet, but I think we've got the ability to collect data to support them.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Actually, in fact, if I were to point out an area, it sounds so dry. Look at telematics. What does telematics do in a vehicle? Brings together a lot of the maybe also the ECU-based information. So I think about the battery. The battery in the vehicle, for you as a consumer, vehicle driver, it's important to have a charged battery. So of course you're interested in that. Now, if you ran a fleet of cars, as a commercial supplier, think about the Amazons of this world or a delivery service. What you're interested in is, as you make that switch towards battery-powered vehicles, you really want to understand how the usage of that battery influences the route description. So really you optimize that. And you certainly do not want your car standing at some corner where no charging station is close by, for sure. And it also points to another area that, abstract from the vehicle even further. The charging infrastructure plays a role today in, things like what's my smart city infrastructure going to look like? How can that be energy efficient? So I think what I'm seeing is clearly different stakeholders centering on the data that's attached to the vehicle, empowered by those sensors, and putting that to use with their own motivations around it.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. Yeah, and I think we'll see that continue to grow. I think we might have another poll question coming up after this slide, Peter.
Yes. Thank you for that, Matt. So, ladies and gentlemen, the second question of today is, what do you think are the top challenges when it comes to connected car safety and security? So in this case, we ask you to pick 3 of your top choices. So it could be cybersecurity threats, reliance on third-party suppliers, smartphone app security, time to market pressures, and separation of safety and non-safety critical systems. Matt and Johannes, what do you think on this question?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm very interested in to see how people feel about this. I mean, I know what my personal feeling is. I'm going to hold back on that a little bit just to see how the poll goes. But Johannes, what are your thoughts here?
Well, security overall, very important. I think when I connect some of the monetization topics to the last point here on this slide, separation of safety and non-safety critical systems. I think and this is actually really an interesting one we'll talk about later, at least the way I experience it now with my team here, is when we talk about safety critical, intervening with the use of data, very dangerous because it's safety oriented. When we talk about non-safety, then it's really about how do you use the data for augmented insight and intelligence that's around it, but you don't influence necessarily the execution of the vehicle itself. So that differentiation, I think, drives also some industry dynamics. At least that would be my response.
No problem. Okay. All right. Let's see how the audience view this. So As we can see right now, it appears that cybersecurity threats are one of the most top. We also have reliance on third-party suppliers, and last but not least, smartphone app security. So most people are very conscious of these aspects when it comes to the autonomous vehicle of today. But let's continue on, though, shall we? And let's see what we have.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a go. Matt, do you want to take that or go? Let me go ahead. So I think from a we recently had we had an analyst in house here at aicas, Egil Juliuson, and this is taken from him. You see the name at the bottom here. What is the connected car industry big picture that kind of like evolves around the increased software-defined vehicle, but also around the data. And you see that it's quite a complex picture. With it's not as straightforward as building the car, putting the pieces together, and then putting them to use. We talk about, particularly from a data perspective, the consumer has a vehicle that produces all sorts of ECU, domain controller, originated data, driver data, car data itself. Suppliers are looking at this to basically, provide possibly specific functional updates. They bring in marketplace services. And suppliers, in a sense, means not necessarily the OEM. It could also mean the first tiers, the second tiers, third parties in that sense. And as you get further down, there's two questions. One is regarding the car data aggregation, and the other one is regarding, the content aggregation, bringing data together in terms of providing better content. There is, of course, with all of this, and I'm sure Matt can relate to that, from his experience, a real big question around the data transmission. Think about all this data and now being transmitted. So the connections from the car, how this is done, even the updates of the software that go into the car are critical to performances of the vehicles themselves. And that drives, again, how we as connected drivers behave, how we put the data to use, and how others are putting it to use in a larger sense. So all this basically paints a broader picture for many industry participants outside of hardware to really engage in what I would call the monetization of this entire connected car experience. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And if we take it back to just our poll question prior to this, how do we manage the security and privacy of this data, right? So we've already discussed the car is going to produce tremendous amounts of data, not only on the car itself, but on the usage, which ultimately means the people in the vehicle. And that is beyond just the driver. That could be someone in the back seat, a friend you're giving a ride to, or even places you're just delivering stuff to on errands, right? So there's a lot going on here. And when you look at this ecosystem that's going to continue to grow, the people who are generating the data, there'll be third parties tied into the vehicles that help contribute to data with smart cities, with VDAX technologies. That data supply base is going to grow, as well as the consumer base. As I mentioned before, the view of data being non-fungible is what really drives the business cases. I can use the same data as you can, Johannes, at the same time for two different purposes with two different business cases, and we can really leverage that data. But as a consumer, how do I know that Matt's using the data properly? I know Johannes is, but Matt's a little suspect. How do I protect myself in that case? So I think we'll have a lot going on here. There's plenty of case stories out there already. A U.S. retailer was using information on consumers and to do targeting mailing of advertisements. They started advertising or mailing advertisements to a woman, if I recall correctly, about the upcoming birth of her child. Well, her husband didn't really like that because that's how he found out she was having an affair. And that's a very simplistic view, but if you look at the potential for data misuse, and I don't mean intentional, I mean it could just be an error, it becomes very significant, and it's going to have to be managed by the OEs, because they are, as this slide points out, kind of in the center of all this, right? They are the ones responsible for everything that follows. So Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time for us.
Yeah, I feel it's almost like the wild, wild west a little bit. Now, data is the new oil, all focused around the vehicle. It produces a whole bunch of data. But the way we look at it, you think about the cloud to edge connection in general speaking around the car. Cloud providers trying to put certainly ever more interesting services onto the car. But the car, being produced and then owned by a consumer, providing, permission or not. No? And sometimes it's a passive, sometimes it's an active. No? But I think even from a technical perspective, how do you create that route is very interesting, because you cannot unlimitedly generate and move data back and forth, which is part of what the whole connectivity is about, in that sense. Good.
Oh, absolutely. So, but I think, and just one point on that, I think we're going to see new areas for data to be carried in and out of the vehicle. Right now, as we get more towards electrification, the theory is that we're going to be plugging in our cars. But as we get to autonomy, I think our cars are going to have to find a path for wireless charging. And both those methods are going to have the ability to carry data both into the vehicle for personalization and updates, et cetera, as well as pull data out of the vehicle for the uses that we talked about already. So there's going to be some change in that transporter as well, I believe.
Absolutely. And I think this kind of leads into, if you do a click down, as software is enabling all this, it becomes more and more relevant, and you can clearly see this in the from a cost and also value perspective, because as you described so nicely, moving data, services, APIs back and forth, something has to be managed. So there has to be an infrastructure on either end to actually manage that efficiently and effectively. So you quickly talk about the fact that software overall is becoming more and more prominent in the vehicle. And as you look at the software values that you see on the slide here, from a component all the way to an auto manufacturer, vehicle manufacturer perspective, that reaches sizable volumes. The cost goes up high, but also the value associated with what you can yield from that software and the data in it goes up significantly. So Matt, just how do you feel about, doesn't this scream also for, what call it application management system, software lifecycle management systems do you actually need to have in order to manage all this in and out regarding software floating towards the vehicle, right?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. Right now, the traditional approach is I build software for a specific device. I do that in-house. I'm probably using a form of a C language because of the APIs for the hardware interface, et cetera. But now, as we move, forward here, the microcontrollers, and build up from those, the software portion of that's going to continue to grow and grow. So you start with a microcontroller, you move up to a module or an ECU, and then ultimately you're taking part of, or the functions moved on to a domain controller, which aggregates all this functionality. So as an OEM, I have a choice to make. I can either decide I'm going to take ownership of the software and do it in-house, which a number of OEMs are, or I'm going to try to manage my supply base and have control over their software development as it feeds up the chain to my vehicle. It's a challenge I don't think that we've seen before in this industry. It's happened in other industries already, but the automotive's going to present a unique challenge just based on the size of the supply base. If you look at the number of parts that go into a vehicle, so I do think it will require that we get into a lot of more modularity in our software and really move more towards an agile approach across the supply base, not just within our own company.
Well, yeah, and I want to complement that by one of the things that of course this raises. Here we have a BOM structure, bill of materials that kind of like put software in there. what about if you want to put that out to the consumer on a transactional model, a fee for use in that sense? So that's where a real challenge is, because again, as we said originally, our topic also is monetization. You think about, how do you monetize this? Do you have consumers willing to pay for services incrementally on top of what the value of their car is, or will they even lease a car only and then see that as transactional, add services flexibly to it? And it kind of like contrasts with the current model of building element on top of elements. The other thing is, you're right, as I looked at the attendee list here, this is a big challenge to manage, for what I see, companies like VW or Stellantis and others. And I think you're right. They're taking their approaches, how do they build out the software factories, the software labs to actually tackle this increased complexity and yielding the value from it, because they, rightly so, they believe they have a good stake in that, a great stake in this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So I think we have, if I'm not mistaken, Peter, we have another round of questions. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Johannes. So, ladies and gentlemen, which development do you think you have the most significant impact on connected cars in the next 5 years? Once again, please pick up to 3 choices. So, as we can see, the 3 choices here will be legislative requirements, example, data privacy or protection. We have IoT and connectivity, V2V and V2X. We have mobility as a service. We also have improved cloud-based automotive technology, consumer adoption, and AI, artificial intelligence. Matt and Johannes, what will be most relevant to you out of all these choices?
I'll let Matt go first.
They're all interesting. I mean, I do think
yes, they are.
Yeah, I think artificial intelligence is a very intriguing area, because one, it's so broad, but 2, it is also driving so much of the use cases or the potential use cases that we're seeing. What do you think, Johannes?
Yeah, I think, the way I look at it is artificial intelligence is almost, it's a core element going forward now, that finds its way into the vehicle. The question is, what do you do with it? And what are the uses? When I look at the other areas, so I would easily subscribe to, I think artificial intelligence is going to be one of the most significant impacts, but it comes out in different ways. What I'm wondering more about is, areas like mobility as a service. Sounds intuitive when you live in urban environment. For example, here in Karlsruhe, it sounds less intuitive when you grew up in the area where I grew up, is in a rural environment, in that sense. So there's different context parameters in that sense. And I think, overall, there will be a big challenge around, and there's a lot of development around IoT and connectivity, just because the data amounts will drive basically connectivity solutions, and they have to be matching the volume of interactions, particularly as you put a lot more autonomous, elements on the road, call them vehicles or otherwise, in that sense.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well,
okay. So what does the audience say? Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Now, so as you can see, the top 3. Or the top 4, I'd say, in this case, will be, in this case, legislative requirements, IoT and connectivity. Also have improved cloud-based automotive technology. Those are the top 3. And if we want to add a 4th one, we also have AI, artificial intelligence. So these are the most common answers that most people picked when it came to looking at developments that will have very great significance on connected cars in the last 5 years.
Interesting.
Do you have any thoughts or anything to add on to that, though, both Matt and Johannes?
Yeah, I guess the legislative requirements isn't a big shock. It seems the government really does have its hand in a lot of this, so that's not a shock to me. And I understand the cloud-based technology, because I kind of view that hand in glove with the AI, so I'm hedging my answer on that one. So at least I'm in the top 2.
Yeah, I think there was it's actually good to see a slight variation of what I would have thought too is legislative requirements are really interesting as an influencer. When you come from a technology environment like we do in most of our cases, it's almost like you could see that is like a fear answer. There will be legislative requirements. What will they look like? How will we have to adjust to those? So in a sense, we all know that something's got to be regulated, but how and what, and what does privacy really mean? Because, a good example is around your comment earlier, Matt, the usage of data or the data use being so much more important. What a consumer perceives as a value derived out of data, if he knew maybe the intricacies where that data comes from, he might perceive it as a threat and say, well, I didn't give permission to do that, but I get the value from it. How do you balance the two? No? And are they being balanced by legislative environments or by adjusted consumer behavior, for example, reacting to it? Good point here. Good call out.
Yeah, excellent.
No problem. Okay. All right, let's continue on with the remainder of the webinar.
Good. Yeah, I think, where's the slide? So, Matt and I, before this conversation here, talked about back and forth about, where's the focus really for software going forward? And this is not a religious discussion, it's just a fact. There's a lot of discussion around software, driving vehicle and safety functionalities, of course, and a lot of involvement, a lot of development has been put there. But more so, I would say increasingly, the focus of software is actually more moving towards what we would call a user experience level. You think about the simplest thing, the navigation, the electric charging. Even think about, things like seat adjustments, memory functions in the end that are not necessarily safety critical, but they're very user experience oriented. And I think, Matt, it's probably fair to say that piece right above the line will play an increasing role in how the software functionality will also evolve around the car, right?
Absolutely. There's no question about that. I mean, we're really talking about the software-defined vehicle in this slide. If you want to kind of put a label on it, it's no longer how much horsepower does my car have, how many cylinders under the hood. It really has focus on the user experience, right? Beyond just kind of personalization. This is a customization enabled by software where, like I said, going back to the example, you and I may drive the exact same car, but our driving habits or driving needs are so variant that the car should learn over time how we use it and what our needs are and adapt to that. If you live in a warm climate, maybe you don't need heated seats. You need cooling seats. With software enablement, you can turn on these features or subscribe to these features. If you go back to our, kind of the first slide, cars used to be built for targets of drivers, right? You'd have a pickup truck, you'd have a family car, you might have a station wagon. Now, going forward, the cars are really going to be built for consumers, which could be more than just the driver. It could be, individuals in the car that the car recognizes are consistently there. And this goes to the whole concept that we talked about on the monetization around the vehicle. If now the car is at the focus, but the consumers can be groups of people that use the car either directly or, secondarily, my fuel station or where I go to get, stop for my coffee and to top off my electric charge in the morning. These places all will gain value from the data created by the car, but it also ties into this user experience. And I think we're going to see significant changes there. The expectations are so much higher that the user experience have a more 3D, voice-driven, interactive experience than anything in the past. And I think over the next, 3 to 5 years, as we get closer and closer to true autonomous driving, we're going to see that level of experience or expectation of user experience being seamless grow and grow. So as companies build this out, it's going to become really the differentiator in the marketplace for them. It's no longer going to be about the physical construct of the car. It's going to be about my experience with that car is how I see this going.
Yeah, and I think, and we're holding that thought for a little bit later. I think what I'm reserving too is that the use of the car, the period of the use of the car, is just being extended further and further. No, it's not like you buy a car and then it's a set feature. No, you're going to see more possibly services going into the car. You see updates. We think about the Tesla experience, of course, but the more software gets into the car, the more the quote unquote updatability over its lifetime may actually change the value of the vehicle to the consumer, basically. It's not just a depreciating vehicle anymore. It's actually something that creates value over its lifetime, basically, in that sense. So,
yeah.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with the lifetime of cars growing, right, we're at a 10 to 12 year lifetime. With software enablement and software definition of features, it makes perfect sense that my car should improve over time. It shouldn't degrade over time. It should get closer to my use and my want over time. Right now my car ages out, and that's why I replace it. But why can't I keep a car longer if it's continually updating itself to my needs?
Yeah. Good. So this of course, leads to complexity of the software itself. It leads to huge amounts of software. And this is kind of like a slide that probably in some ways we've seen the variations in other forms as well. The car is a complex vehicle. It's, the more autonomous it gets more intense. Things have to be built. They have to be coded. And from that perspective, that coding requires basically a response. We talk about nowadays, 150 ECUs and more to actually be in the car. And I think that drives basically integration. It drives also the way how software lifecycle management around managing these components is actually done. So Matt, I know you and we talked about what's the response that we could give to this? The complexity of software being so incredibly high. What are some of the tweaks that could get us out of this and help us along?
Boy, if I have that answer, I'll be a wealthy individual. No, I think we're seeing it already. As you mentioned, there's 150 ECUs in vehicles. That the functionality provided by those controllers are going to ultimately be replaced in software. And as we move to the consolidation of that functionality into domains or domain controllers in the vehicle, that will help simplify the architecture of the vehicle, and it will, of course, also make the importance of the software greater, as far as making certain it stays within its domain, doesn't interfere, those kind of things. So, and obviously, aicas is very familiar with that capability already. But you're looking at having larger compute platforms within the vehicle that now can provide the work of 20, 30 ECUs and provide it in a manner that's more flexible, modular, updatable, that's driven from driven over the life of the vehicle instead of degrading over the life of the vehicle. And some of this, if I have a telecom background, and if you look at how the architectures in the vehicle for communication are some of them are looking a lot like the old telecom sonnet rings, which are extremely reliable. And I think we'll see a reduction in the hardware complexity, an improvement in the redundancy and fail-safe, and a increase in the reliance on the software and the quality of software, which, if you look at the OEs and the ones building out their own software factories or in-house software development groups, I think the mind shift is changing from software is no longer an expense. This is going to be a capital asset, and it'll carry across brands and across product lines very nicely.
Yeah, totally agree there. So, and I think the key thing is you want to be sure you have the platforms that actually allow you to keep pace with this software increase. I like to think of it, it's almost back 20 years or so when you were in enterprise IT or in some other places. Out of a sudden came the plug and play laptops and all the functionalities. It almost feels like the vehicle is this experimental ground where new entrants are coming with new components, new users are coming in. How do you keep that together so that you don't have to constantly reinvent and redevelop, frankly, what you're about to do? And that speaks to standardization. So this gets into and I think that's a topic we want to preach on, which how do you keep this ship together in that sense? So we talked about earlier the fact that as you look at a vehicle platform, it stretches all the way out into the operate stage, basically. And now you have data along the way that enables you to continuously integrate new functions, do the integration testing, of course, between different components. Also, your delivery, that your original delivery you thought of, you may have to adjust over time. And then there's a continuous operation where you bring functionality into the car. So from that point of view, Matt, what kind of the concepts are you thinking of relative to keeping this cycle really perfecto in that sense and agile, because it's not easy to manage through the increasing complexity of developing the software that drives the vehicle there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And agile's a spot-on word, because OEMs and anyone in this space is going to have to move to more of an agile development methodology if they haven't already. The data is ultimately going to be processed a lot closer to consumption. And what I mean by that is with these domain controllers and the ability for the vehicle to have more compute power, things that used to have to be done solely in the cloud or in back-end systems can now be done in the vehicle, where they're closer to the consumption by the consumer of that data. And it provides a lot of opportunity, not only for machine learning in the vehicle, but also aggregate machine learning across vehicles. So manufacturers can push out feature updates and benefit updates to their vehicles over the air, which obviously over the air updates will come into play more and more here, similar to your phone or your computer at home, which, seem to get updates on almost a daily basis in my world. It also do a lot for safety systems, right? If you think about autonomous, we don't know the edge cases for autonomous yet. We don't know the safety challenges. You and I, just naturally, as we've learned to drive over the years, have picked up on how to perceive when something's a dangerous environment. We're going to have cars learn that. So with the ability to do more of an agile update, not only on the processing, but on the features, we're going to create a safer vehicle system here. And of course, the other thing that'll come into play when you talk safety is just the security. We'll be able to keep a level of security in the car at its highest. It's one thing if my phone crashes or if someone, has a problem with their computer. But if you have a problem with a truck hauling 40,000 pounds of material down the highway at high speeds, that can be dangerous to a lot of people. So, it offers a way to accelerate the pace across the board, I think, for the OEM as well as the consumers. And I think that's an awesome potential for this industry right now.
Yeah, and I just want to add only to that. I think you cannot look at this from just a platform, a single platform, let's say around a vehicle, but also what's the quote unquote portability between platforms from a software perspective. Now you have modular capabilities, and you don't have to reinvent each component necessarily, redevelop it and port it over to another vehicle platform. For example, in the cases where product lines get merged together, companies move together, and we see it in the marketplace. Customers we interface with, how they're now being challenged to actually integrate different software approaches, and that gets all the way down to the platforms well, wouldn't it be great, because we're talking about software, that you just basically, simplistically speaking, link better, no? So the various components, so that you can keep your time to market and your development cost at the best low, basically. So I think that's a big challenge. No? Good. Okay, I think it's time for another round of questions, Peter.
Yes, thank you for that, Johannes. So, in our third poll question, we have, how would you describe your company's approach to developing software-defined vehicles? Choose which answer is most applicable to you. So we have the options. It's a top initiative. It could also be a side project. We are in the planning stages, or we have no plans to do anything. Both in this case, Matt as well as Johannes, what would you say would be a good approach to developing software-defined vehicles, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, obviously, if you're an OEM these days, that has been producing cars for decades, if not a century, software is top of mind. There's no way around it. And I think if you're a new entrant, for example, on the EV side, that's where you start, basically. And that's where the challenge is. So for those that have been mass producing vehicles, and they have a greatest expertise in doing so, satisfying different market needs, they're looking at new market entrants to say, how do we make sure we're at par? And that's what explains some of these moves that we see by particularly OEMs building software factories. So it is a top initiative. I'd be surprised if it was otherwise, frankly. I don't know, Matt, what do you think about that?
I think if it isn't, it should be, and it will be in the near future. So I could see where, top initiative or in the planning stages, but I would have to assume it's probably late planning stages, as you rightfully articulated.
No problem. All right. Let's see how the audience in this case responded. So most people say it's a top initiative, but at the same time, also, it's the same with they have no plans to do anything. So those would be in this case, two top performing answers when it comes to company approach.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go on to the last.
I was going to say that probably speaks to the diversity of our audience, not all being OEMs. That probably explains that. But
correct.
Okay. All right, so let's move on, Johannes.
Good. All right. So monetization overall, if you think about that, we talked about the prevalence of data now driving a lot of the opportunities. There are indirect opportunities that basically have to do with the inside of the cars mainly, or the development process. You see some at the bottom. How is data being transmitted? All the way to things like testing automation. How can you automate tests around the developing the right software within the software development process? And that is primarily a question of efficiency and effectiveness. With the direct monetization, it's really about the revenue that you gain. So think about the functions on demand that consumers or even commercial consumers, quotation mark, will center around the card. So this is about bringing third-party applications into the mix, making sure that those functionalities that are enabled by the software-defined car are actually put to use to create revenue streams. And I think that is where the new business models will really center a lot of their attention on direct monetization of the data that's associated with the car. A lot of them we probably haven't even thought of. But some of them, whether it's the car sharing, I just heard yesterday an example, I think it was WeShare, again, from Volkswagen, basically having your car in your private parking lot and renting it out for a couple of hours. It's a great revenue stream. The question then is, of course, you as a consumer who is basically renting out that car, how do you maintain the car's functionality after each use? Because that's now part of what you own. Maybe there's sensors involved that trigger this, keep track of it. So these are revenue opportunities that everybody's thinking of. But the realization of that will still take some time to actually make sure it's sound and proof. Matt, I think there's, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to find someone's chips in my car after I've rented it out. But I think the big area for monetization really falls with the OEMs directly, because the data coming out of the car is going to enable them to reduce things like warranty costs, which are just huge numbers, and reducing those will drop right to the bottom line. So the focus on monetization, obviously with third parties and new features and services from third parties is a great potential, but I think there's potentials closer to home for the manufacturers, the OEMs and even the tiers, to reduce their costs and really improve their bottom lines in this case, which is monetization.
Yep, which is it's all resulting in something. You're absolutely right. So I think, as we close the webinar here, what are some of the key things that we as a company, aicas, we have been on this planet for 20 years. Most of those years very involved in automotive. And there's a couple of things that we take from that experience. 20 million licenses deployed, running every day. So we observe things. We interact with a lot of customers. First one is you want to reduce risk. It's you want to be sure that you work with recognized partners, of course. In our case, we're part of vendors to watch list with Gartner, but that's a side note only. But you also want to make sure that the development capabilities on the other side really enable you to actually reduce either the business risk or the execution risk. Time to market is absolutely a key. How do you make sure that you create time to market that is the most short, that has a lot to do with your development process around the vehicle? Also, when you think about time to market, what market requirements do you have to meet? We talked about the elongated use phases. How do you keep pace with that? So you want to work with somebody who basically enables this kind of like platform approach which allows you to, whether it's microservices, APIs, route them through a platform that actually gets to the destination right. And then I think, Matt, there are some other benefits that we're thinking of that play a key role in the automotive side.
Yeah, no question about that. And I think the takeaway on this slide, when I look at it, Johannes, is frankly, these have been the pillars that aicas has operated on for 20 years, and they're probably more applicable today than they were 20 years ago in the automotive industry, and they will continue to grow to be more and more applicable here. But I think you're spot on, and I think the foundational pillars here make perfect sense for what we're talking about.
Good. All right. So basically, I think with that, I like to basically close the official part of the session here. A big greeting from aicas Automotive, your partner. If you want to change lanes, we're here to create that value with you. You have a trusted partner here. I mentioned earlier, millions of licenses sold. We're in the business with a lot of the OEMs already in different places, first tiers as well as second tiers. And if you really want to reach out to us and look at the software-defined value creation path, then give us a call or send us an email, basically. Johannes and Matt, both of us.
Yeah.
Peter? No, Matt, go ahead.
Great.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, Peter, I think there might be some questions that we can squeeze in here before we wrap up.
Right.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you very much, both Johannes and Matt.
Yep.
So just a quick reminder to the audience, if you do have any questions, please submit them into the box at the top right-hand corner of the screen. But for the first question of the day, how can we future-proof vehicles in an environment where computing technology advances every day, or vehicles might stay in use for about 10 to 15 years or more?
Okay. Well, Johannes, I can take a crack at this answer.
Oh, sure.
And then you can jump in here. But obviously, if the computing technology, I'm assuming we're discussing the platforms. So if we separate the applications from the platform and make it more portable, and this goes to the capitalization discussion earlier in this roundtable or webinar. I think that's the way we do it, where we keep that independence from the platform, not only to protect us from advances in technology, but look at today, we've got chip shortages. There's OEs and tiers that are going to be forced to change their chip, which will require a massive update to the software in some cases. So I think if you keep them separate and portable, that's where you get your best protection. Johannes?
Yeah, I think I'm also thinking around the layer of the data. Then it kind of correlated with safety critical, non-safety critical in that sense. And I think you have to make sure that you define different layers right and keep them open for whatever requirement is coming to them. So I think for the safety critical area, you want to be sure you execute the functions that the vehicle is designed to do right, of course. That's critical because of that. And separate that from, for example, the mere data management, the data intelligence layer, and allow flexibility here in terms of the software functions that should actually trigger. So you have to make sure they're appropriately architected, but that you can plug in and out, for example, AI, APIs or solutions. You can deploy also as needed new software functionality, but you don't bring down the vehicle integration, but you basically find the anchor points, and that usually happens through a software platform right at the top.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Thank you very much, Matt and Johannes. So the second question reads, data is becoming the industry's new fuel. How would you say this is in helping to drive mobility forward?
So I think this is such a wide question. I mean, there's so many different use cases one could think of. I think data, I just think simply about the navigation system that we use, and whether it's in the car, whether you use your mobile phone. I mean, I'm thinking about my normal day these days. In the old days, I assumed I get to work within 20 minutes to 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. Today, I assume I get on time to work. And it's basically based on data, that experience. It's based on the data that's derived from many other factors out there. So we're now getting to a point where we expect accuracy, and it actually allows us to maybe open up that time that we save for other things that we can do. So data shapes our life and our mobility patterns, how we drive around, and that's just the navigational system. In the future, what I'm thinking of is think about the commercial use data, the buying experience. The real extreme example was the one that Matt gave earlier, with the emergency room calling and alerting you. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but how about you putting a purchase order in, maybe in a standard basket, and sending this out and picking it up at the store, those kinds of things. So all this is data based. And the software functionality has to be built into the car to allow you to do that. So I think it will vastly shape the way we think about mobility.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think obviously this seems like a very broad answer, I guess, from my part. But we've been discussing this throughout the whole webinar. The data is going to be the key to driving everything, because that's what the use cases are going to be supported by. And because the data is fungible and can be used in so many manners, it is the foundation for moving forward here, be it the use cases you just described or ones none of us have even conceived at this point. So absolutely. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you very much, Matt and Johannes. So the car is becoming the new mobile smart device. This means that apps will also find their way into the vehicle for the first time. Which third-party apps will consumers find in their cars in the next 10 years, in your own opinion?
Yeah, that's I can't commit to any specific apps, but I believe the apps that will be most successful are the ones that are going to make my life easier. And I think that will be the driving criteria here. We already talked about the software-defined car and the user experience. And that's really where I'm coming from on this. Anything that improves my user experience and interaction with the vehicle, that's where the apps will be. Whoever makes those will make money.
So I totally agree with that first statement, and I would add to that something I said earlier. Who's the driver of the car? Is it a consumer who's driving from point A to point B, or is it a driver who's supposed to get from point A to point B? So there's different applications that allow the commercial use of the vehicle and enable that, but it's a different level of user experience, in fact, and also has consequences for example, the delivery or something that this asset is supposed to do versus a consumer. But I would totally agree with Matt. Make my life more productive, make it more comfortable based on data, and I'm all in.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I mean, just to also add on to that, it's even possible in the next 5 years, for example, like your Gmail or your Yahoo account will allow you to email from the car. So your phone battery may be dead, and it's possible that you could even email from your car. So such apps like that will make a lot of people's lives a whole lot easier in this case. So one person does ask, if you have like any upcoming global privacy standard rules for, in this case, is cars that are actually like connected and smart. So they do also add on that cars are connected to dealers and vendors for maintenance. They're also connected to smart cities and other cars to share information and stats in end-to-end of, you could say, all of people's, you could say, daily habits. So what the question was is, in your opinion, do you know any upcoming global privacy standard rules for smart cars?
Well, privacy is always being worked on, and there are some standards out there already, the GDPR and others. Mm-hmm. I think the security standards that are being rolled out are in support of privacy. Some of the privacy concerns, I think, will kind of diminish to some extent. Our smartphones today probably give up way more information on us than we. Well, I know they give up way more information on us than anyone perceives. So just because the car becomes the next smart device, does that really change? I think there's a sensitivity to it because it's new features and functionalities. But I think we'll rationalize the privacy and security concerns appropriately going forward with permissive use and other accommodations for the consumers across both commercial and non-commercial use cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just add to this, I think, privacy and the use of data, exposure of data is one of the most prominent topics here in Europe, where our company resides with its headquarters. That's not to say it's not in other places, but I think if you were to watch a legislative environment, you certainly would take a look at Europe, and GDPR was just mentioned in that sense. Now, it drives a whole lot of other factors. I think the next frontier is, which we also saw, is the whole cloud integration, data being uploaded somewhere. We already see this is changing on a regional basis, data being exchanged across borders. Think about vehicles in that respect as data carriers and data producers. So whatever happens there, I would expect a lot of that could come out of Europe, but that's just a regional flavor based on the fact that we're in the middle of it, and that's a big discussion.
Right.
Great. All right, thank you very much for that, Matt and Johannes. So the last question of today is all about more to do with maintenance. So one person says about complexity. According to the right to repair law, I should be able to fix my car. So that means that in the future, people like OEMs and manufacturers will need to be able to share the software code in order for me to fix it myself. So then do you see that happening in the future?
Okay.
Oh, my. You agree, right, Matt?
You want me to take a shot at this?
You said already you agree, yeah?
Well, no, all right. So I will put on my lawyer hat on this one. So yes, I mean, there absolutely is right to repair. There's a differential, though, because the software code also is going to be owned and copyright protected, as well as there's other privacy concerning corporate ownership and what rights the corporation has to protect that. And I think that's separate and apart from the right to repair, frankly. It is a great topic. I love the question. It's going to be one that comes down to there will be some litigation around it. There's no question about that. There's already litigation over who owns the software in the cars and who owns the data in the cars. So I can see, and I appreciate the question. I think it's a very forward-thinking question. But I think it will be settled very much along the lines of you have a right to repair, but you don't have a right to alter the OEM's code. That would be my take on it based on where we sit today.
Yeah, and my take on that is actually even more, it's almost like there's a practical example. Think about if you're the AAA organization in the United States or the ADAC here in Germany, the automobile associations. No? They have a really hard time now when a car breaks down to provide a fix. No? So in more cases than none, they have to actually make sure that the car is being brought to a repair shop because you really can't adjust anymore. You can't even read out the behavior of the car, the cause, do a root cause analysis. So I think with Matt's interest clearly stated, I think there probably are other stakeholders who will go there first and possibly ask for, we need to be able to help the consumers get back on the road, basically. And they will be venturing on behalf of the consumers to do that, or vouching. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Matt and Johannes. And thank you to the audience. Just a quick reminder, if you did not get your question answered today, they will be available at a later date. So that just leaves me to thank both Matt and Johannes for what a great presentation, and to aicas for sponsoring this event. Now, to all the attendees, you will receive an email shortly on how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar, or you can access it through our website, which is www.business-review-webinars.com. So now we look forward to sharing future webinars with you. So please do keep an eye out on our website, as mentioned, and follow us on Twitter at BRWebinars for daily updates, and join our LinkedIn community group. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar, and hope you all have a very nice day. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.